I've worked at a school, I worked at a juvenile home, and my immune system is pretty tough. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
but like what I see now at the schools, man, I see especially the younger kids of like, they feel self-conscious about not wearing a mask because their peers haven't seen them without a mask before. So you got the, image issues and self-conscious issues and things like that. So that's the thing. Right. And then people are still scared of getting sick. Right. I have in my doctorate program, one of my cohorts, she quit because we came back on campus and she was like, yeah, I just don't feel safe. You know what I mean? And so, there is a collective trauma for everybody. I think everybody had to suffer through some form of trauma being stuck in the house for, the greater part of 18 months. You know what I'm saying? So with that comes children who can't really articulate some of the things that they feel. And then they, it manifests itself out in behaviors, and so that's kind of what I see. Like some of the colleagues that I talk to who are teachers and educators, man, it's like I'm trying to inform them that this behavior you see is a direct byproduct of the trauma they experienced.
100%. And I think it's kind of like, when would be a better time to operationalize and use hip hop therapy or hip hop wellness based approaches, right?
Right.
We're emerging from a time where we were completely shelled up, sheltered in, closed off, right? Hip hop therapy for specifically, right, is a tremendously embodied approach, right? It's reactivating and getting back online. Like even if you don't dance, right, when you're rapping and you're moving, you're, you know what I mean, you're bopping, you're engaged physically, you're engaging your breathing, you're breathing in your diaphragm, you're kind of, it's a very enlivening experience. You can't come up on to a mic if you're just kind of dull and dead. So that's a way to reactivate the body, get the kind of like take you out of that freeze state that we all have been collectively forced into in a sense. And it's also tremendously relational hip hop, right? You were talking about the cipher before. That's something that we've all been deprived of, youth, especially during those formative years, that when that's your peer group is, the primary thing, and they're not seeing them every day in school, and it all just becoming virtual digital life. So I think, hip hop therapy is particularly useful now, and primarily because of what's inherent to hip hop culture with that relational nature and its embodiment. You know what I mean? It's not just sitting and talking and,
Right. I swear you had this, like you've been reading my script. So my next point, man, I saw you on, I don't know if it was a podcast or some kind of Zoom meeting. I saw you on, you posted on IG where you talked about knowledge movement and embodied knowledge. Right. And then you quoted KRS-One in his Hip Hop Lives joint. So I'm gonna just kind of read these lyrics, man, and we're gonna kind of break these things down. And then we go from there. So it says, hip means to know. It's a form of intelligence. To be hip is to be update and relevant. Hop is a form of movement. You can't just observe a hop. You got to get up and do it. Hip and hop is more than music. Hip is the knowledge. Hop is the movement. Hip and hop, an intelligent movement, a relevant movement. We're selling the music, right? So in that whole, 8 bars or whatever that was, it was so much power in that. And him just breaking down really everything you just said just prior to that, this question is, I think, one of, if not one of the most poignant pieces of art that KRS-One has ever exhibited. And he's got a lot in his toolbox and in his discography. But I always felt like this was one of his doper songs, especially I think it would have came out in 2007 or something like that. And I just thought it was dope, man. So let me get you how you broke that down.
Yeah, I mean, he hit it on the head 100%. And it also, I think, ties back to what we were speaking on before about the benefits of emceeing that cultural facet, right? The intelligent movement, the hip and the hop, the knowing. So when you're rapping, you're utilizing language, right? You're utilizing your intelligence. You're trying to make a point. You're telling a story. But it's not just speaking, you're doing it in a bodily, a very embodied fashion where you're bopping, and that there's rhythm that invokes movement built within the syllables themselves, themselves, right? The exchange between stressed and unstressed syllables, that's the hop that's built within it. But each syllable, each rhythm, each unit of rhythm also has verbal significance. Right. That's kind of what I think really can amplify in terms of bridging that gap between top down and bottom up approaches, where hip hop therapy and emceeing especially really bridges that gap in terms of holistically bringing the whole brain online in a sense, right? Hip would be those higher cortical regions, the human brain, the thinking, the analysis, critical awareness, critical consciousness. And then the hop is kind of more the reptilian, the limbic, the movement. So I think in the hip is the knowledge, hop is the movement. He's very succinctly describing what makes hip hop such an effective art form, but also as a result, an effective tool when attempting to utilize it for healing, because it's hitting all aspects of our existence, right? The emotional, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, even. It's tapping into all of them simultaneously. You know what I mean? Like instead of it being specialized and segmented and separated. And there's not many things that I can think of where I'm engaged in it that I feel like all of those are online at once. You know what I'm saying? And that holistic functioning from the brain, right, even on a neurophysiologic level, is what is necessary for traumatic processing and working through some of these traumas that we've experienced that get lodged in our brain and get stuck and aren't, parts of our brain shut down, and it's kind of trapped in there. So the only way to really process a traumatic memory is to access it first, and a lot of it is just kept offline.
I think like the whole point of the trauma experience for me, and why I even got into hip hop in the first place, was it was an event. Like I think in 4th, 5th grade, I started writing short stories, and so those short stories would be me dealing with whatever trauma that I was dealing with at the time, but metaphorically using it as different characters. So, the trauma would be the bad guy, and the kid superhero would be me dealing with the trauma, or me living with the trauma simultaneously, which everybody thought was weird when I was like 10. You know what I'm saying? But as I got older into being an artist, those things they would always leak themselves out in different songs. No matter if I was just trying to tell you how dope I was, I'd always bring up some type of trauma response within that, right? And so even the whole name Michael Myers and that whole persona was really my vent of killing things, was really me trying to kill that trauma, right? And so that's why I spell my name Mike Kill Myers, right? And it was catchy at the time because it looks good at warehouse or the CD place, right? But also it was a metaphor for Mike skills, you know what I'm saying? And also short for, or abbreviated to, me killing off
those parts of myself.
Right. Those parts of, exactly, the parts of myself. Right. And so I always struggle with the duality of Michael Arrington versus Michael Myers. And so for me, I live this bipolar lifestyle because I am a beast on stage or in the studio, but I'm one of the most humble cats you'll ever meet outside of that. Right. And so even in some of the people that I've talked to on this show, Mike and I included, while I was trying to give him his flowers for his innovation and him pioneering a certain level of MCing, he was like, hey, don't sell yourself short, man. You're dangerous on the business end of that mic too. Facts. And but I'm still struggling with the duality, right? And so but as
I wonder,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm at a point now to where I'm trying to merge the two, and I'm struggling with that. You know what I'm saying? I'm struggling with the two.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I wonder to what extent that humble, calm side is allowed to exist because you're getting all of that out on the stage when you bring the beast out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's almost like, and I can relate with this, that duality I don't know if it's almost inescapable, right? I think we all have those sides to us. And maybe it boils down a bit to like Freud's conceptualization of id, ego, super ego, right?
Right.
You know, like those really like basically when you're on stage, it's your super ego and id battling it out.
Right.
That's what it sounds like. You're trying to kill off these dark parts of yourself, these dark experiences, right? That's what from a Jungian perspective, confronting your shadow is, right? Recognizing these really dark, deep things within you that we all have, that we often, you know, be like, oh, I'd never do that. I don't have those kind of urges. I don't have that. Like integrating the shadow is about recognizing like, no, I have the capacity to be a very dark person.
Right.
But using that for good and using that in a way where it's sublimated or put into something that is more healthy, right? So I think in a sense you're doing that on the stage, and that's creating space for the ego, just you kind of like regular, you know,
kind
of like
me,
being calm and chill.
Yeah, in high school, I was a basketball dude and a football dude, so that was a level of vent and frustration I can get out. That competition, that physical contact, you know, those types, especially with football. Like I can hit somebody and not get in trouble for it, or I'm sign me up, right?
Yep,
and then after that, you know, my career was over. Hip hop was the next best thing, you know, and if you came up in the time where I came up in the early to mid 90s, battling was a full contact sport. You know what I'm saying? There'd be times where I had to fight because I said some really crazy something to somebody, man. And so, but I come from that. Like, so even when I used to play on the blacktop, playing basketball on the blacktop, cats would want to play one-on-one, and I'd play for shoes, right? We play for shoes. And if I can't fit them, I throw them on the roof. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't get your shoes back. You know what I'm saying? So hip hop was that competitive force that I needed for that level of vent, because all of that vitriol I had from the childhood trauma that I was experiencing and I couldn't even really articulate until I got to be an adult, right? And so that's why when I work with the youth, I really, really understand some of the things they go through and some of the things they feel, and they don't know how to properly contextualize it all. So it also manifests itself in just negative behaviors.
100%. That duality you were just speaking of, what makes you want to bridge that?
Because the two can't cease to coexist without one another, right? Like for as much as the different as Michael Arrington is from Michael Myers, the only difference is in the two is when they're on stage. Right. And so like right before I'm on stage, man, and anybody that knows me has been close to me before I have a show, I am the worst. I'm very, very non-communicative, man. The anxiety and the nervousness, it takes over. You know what I'm saying? And it's there until the beat drops. And then once the beat drops, I am a totally different dude. Right. And in the minute I'm done, and I'm at my last song and I'm like, you know, I appreciate you guys coming out, man. Like it means everything to me to hear, you know what I'm saying? Like the humble comes back. But in that, you know, hour, 30 minutes or whatever I'm on stage, man, I am a totally different person. And also though, when I'm speaking to youth or speaking to at conferences, I'm Michael Myers again. It's just, I'm not using that name. You know what I'm saying? When I'm talking about implicit bias or I'm talking about suicide prevention or whatever the topic is, I'm in a zone. You know what I'm saying? And so that zone is not necessary. For years, it's always been that zone was Michael Myers. But no, that zone was me portraying an image as Michael Myers.
That's you using that. That's you using that darkness for good. That's right. That's you integrating that shadow, utilizing that, right, and bringing that performance piece into when you're doing speaking engagements and all that.
Right. And my infatuation with serial killers really came from growing up in the 80s where there was real live serial killers running around. You know what I'm saying? So, but how I got into therapy or psychology even was I wanted to know why people could flip like that. You know, they go from having a whatever life and going through whatever trauma they went through, but their way to deal with it is like, I'm going to go on a killing spree and do me. I was very, very interested in how the brain works like that. And so that's what got me
Absolutely.
into psychology, man. And so, I took the long route, but I got here.
No, absolutely. They're similar for me, man. Like I think most people get into psychology because they want to figure